I think I'm starting to develop into having a lot of confidence in who I am as an individual. Record your conversation that you have and then play it back to yourself. The first time you do that, it always goes of that, oh, I hate my voice, hate this, oh, why do I look that way? But eventually it becomes, I thought I said something different. I thought I communicated that better, and you get to work on this skill of the way you present yourself. I was thinking about loneliness, and I was like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And I remember sitting there and I was like, that was the first time I was like, I don't want this to end, but I don't want to think about anything else other than being present in this moment.
Dale, welcome to the show, and thank you for having me in your studio.
Of course. It's weird sitting at this. You're the first person to sit at this setup. Well, with me on it. So
I think I've got a bias towards the desk setup because you grow up watching Rogan with a desk.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's definitely better. I need to get a smaller desk, I think. One of those longer tables so you can get more people at it. But slowly but surely.
Yeah, it looks amazing, mate. And to see the evolution of it since this was like a pipe dream has been amazing.
Yeah, so I've changed this studio. I've only had it 2.5 years. And I think I've changed it every 3 months. I've done something new. It's weird how the brain just...
Where do you think that comes from? Just progression?
I don't know. I think you're maybe a wee bit naive at the start and you have a vision for it. And then that vision, you're like, actually, you could do this. Like I always wanted something dark and moody. And see, if you go back to the old episodes when me and James used to do them, there was like a tin chair in that corner, a tin chair there. And it was like this little dull light. And I was like, yeah, that looks sick. And I was like, you can't even see your faces. So I think it's just evolution of like getting to learn about video editing, lighting, all that sort of stuff. It's like spurred on more ideas. So
yeah, you've gone super deep on that. And I think in contrast to like my podcasting side of things has been like different things that I've like aimed for, and you've definitely aimed for a lot of those things. I'm sure we'll get onto those as well. But you're kind of synonymously known as Coach Crossar.
Yeah.
And that's nowadays the podcast host, the fitness coach, the gym owner, the studio owner. Yep. But that name comes from way before.
It does.
That was the kind of focus of life.
So it comes from my corporate life, which weirdly enough, I don't know why, like I always liked coaching people. In high school, I gravitated toward basketball. Loved every basketball game, or watched every basketball game, but never really found anyone. Everyone liked football and that. I never really gravitated towards that. I was always really good at sports, or thought I was good at sports, should I say. Anyway, fast forward to the corporate world. We sit and helping get promoted to what was called a team coach, and I quite liked the idea. And I was like, finally, I'm a coach. And was helping one of the newer guys out with some sort of system. And he knew I liked basketball. He goes, oh, you're like Coach Carter, but it's Coach Crossar. And boom, just instantly clicked. I was like, I really like that. I think I changed my Instagram to that and changed my gamer tag at any games I was playing then. And that just stuck with me. So it felt natural 6-7 years later when I decided to step into personal training. I was like, I've already got the name. The alias is set up.
And you had that positive feedback loop back then that coaching was something that you enjoyed, albeit in a very different field.
Yeah, and I think that's why I stuck with it for so long. For anyone that doesn't know my story, kind of going back, I wanted to be a personal trainer. I vividly remember being at family parties and was just coming to leave school, and I was going to college to do sports and fitness stuff. And it was like, what do you want to be when you're older? And I was like, I want to be a personal trainer. But for some reason, I don't think it was anything other than there was no older PTs, and I just convinced myself that the right thing to do was to get this good job and climb the ladder that way. And luckily enough, I got a job with a pretty reputable company, worked for BT, which became BT and OpenReach. And there was tons of opportunity within that. I remember getting that job and I was like, right, cool, what's next? And just gradually climbed the ladder of leadership, and I found that I really liked that part. And that's what kept me in the job for so long, and chasing the monetary value, but also chasing like the enjoyment of like getting into coaching sessions with people, albeit completely different to the coaching sessions that I have now, but being able to speak with people, understanding compassion, energy, empathy, and all that sort of stuff. So
all skills that you get that exciting feedback from, but in a totally different field. And knowing that you had that passion for health and fitness and that passion for helping people, but just applying it in this completely other realm it's unusual, but it makes sense when you actually analyze. And I think you're somebody that's done a lot of self-reflection. I think when we both hit 30 years of age, you kind of feel compelled to look back and understand what's going on.
I think when you turn 30, it's like, wow, is this what 30 feels like? And you're like, still feel young though. I thought 30 I would feel old as shit. Don't get me wrong. You definitely, life goes by so quick. But yeah, no, you're right. Like looking back, I was like, well, I've done actually quite a lot. But I think that's the reason I was in the corporate job for so much. I didn't really understand self-development. And it wasn't until I dove into it in the last couple of years, I was like, I've actually been chasing self-development just in that world, and that allowed me to do that through being a team manager, a senior manager and coach, and all these various jobs that I had within the business.
I try not shit on corporate jobs all the time on podcasts. I think it's really irresponsible to do so, because the vast majority of people will probably end up working in some sort of corporate role, and it takes a very slightly unique character to really go it yourself. And I think that the preconditions and the support and love of our parents is quite often conservative with a small c, not politically conservative, but protective conservative in terms of like, oh, we want you to have a safe job, we want you to have a safe career. And the world has changed so much from our parents' generation, where it's a very different landscape when it comes to jobs, careers, and how often we're going to move between them as well.
You're absolutely right, because it's one of the biggest reasons I probably stayed. I don't know, I'm very much a people pleaser, and I always want that accomplishment, or like for my mum or my dad or my family to go, oh, Dale's doing really well. So when I landed that job, my auntie worked in the business, and she was in there, she'd been in there since she was the same age as me. And it was like, oh man, so proud of you, set for life. And that feedback, I was like, right, okay, I'm in the right place. So when it was like, okay, what is it she does? Okay, she's a team manager. Can I be a team manager? Can I be a team coach? And the opportunities were brilliant for me. It just became like, get good at the role first. Became good at the role within a couple of months. It was a very simplistic desk job, answering phones, playing about with technology. Like the average age of the person in that site, I think it was like maybe 35, 36. So we came in as this young group of apprentices, 15 of us at the time. I think only 5 of us ended up staying there as I went through it. But it was like this new system was rolled out, and it was just computer literacy, like Control C to copy, and they were hitting right click, fingerprint. So you just
Coach Crossar could show them how to.
You just excelled at the job. And I remember doing a training day, or the first bank holiday came up, and because the company was in Scotland and in England, the English centres were off, but we still had to go into work. So we used to have this kind of open day, and we'd have a bit of fun, but we'd do these mini trainings. And I was like, I can teach like some computer literacy, and I literally was teaching people how to Control C and the keyboard does this, Control V, and it was going down really well. And I was like, oh, I like this part. And then it just evolved more and more.
When you find things that you enjoy, they often are indicators, or they point towards what might come further down the line. And I've heard this from so many different guests, like, oh, there was this thing that gave me this dopaminergic feedback that I'm good at this. Maybe I should spend my time on that. Just sometimes we're using the wrong vehicle, or we're in the wrong industry or the wrong area. And it's just a case of, look, if we can realign that and implement these behaviors in another sector, we're going to fly. And look at what's happened over the last couple of years, how quickly things have moved, because you took this skill set you'd built and just applied it to someone else.
Well, you said that a lot of people do shit in the corporate world. It's the whole like NPC pattern and all that sort of stuff, but I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for that job. And I absolutely could have stayed in that job if my purpose was aligned with it. But as I grew as an individual, my purpose sort of changed a little bit as well. For 5-6 years of my life, my purpose was like helping the world with telecommunications, but really deep down it was like, let me lead a team of people to really enjoy the job and create a fantastic environment of work that they can come to. And I've seen people in that job for 30, 40 years, and I was like, you know what, it's incredible that you guys can stick to that, because their purpose was, this job pays really well. I have a balance for the lifestyle that I have Monday to Friday. I can go on holidays to the dream destinations that I want a couple of times a year. And I was like, you know what, purpose isn't just all about
horses for courses. I'm a big fan of that. And I think the kind of people that listen to a podcast like mine, a podcast like yours now, there is a predisposition to wanting a little bit more and not wanting to be in the middle lane and just chugging along at the same speed.
What you see the top 0.1% lifestyles, and you're like, oh, I want a piece of that. I'm sure I would if rewind back to me growing up at the age of being 18 in today's world in 2024. And I'm seeing all of that. It'd be very interesting to see how my life would change.
It's hard to step outside the programming. I find it so interesting. And if I reflect on some of the stories I've heard over my time getting to know you, Dale, about working in that role, you worked super hard and like super dedicated towards it. And there must have been that story that you say you're telling yourself, like, I've got a greater purpose here. I want to create a team of people around me that are enjoying their job. I want to progress. I want to see the next fiscal return. And the corporate ladder in that respect, particularly in a huge company like BT Openreach, there is steps and there's rungs. So it's actually really easy to measure progress. Whereas I do understand there are corporate businesses where it's so hard to see what role you play, how important you are a cog in the wheel.
Oh, absolutely. And I think if you can get caught up in the number game, because ultimately you can be replaced relatively easy, but at the same time, why does it matter? Because you can also be remembered pretty easily. And see when you're saying that, I think I always ask myself, like, why did I work so hard at a business that the extra hours I put in I never get paid more? Yes, there was maybe a bit of status and recognition that came from it. And I remember doing that in the first couple of months in, when they were looking for volunteers to teach this new team of people who came in. I was like, yeah, I'll do it. We were supposed to finish at 4. Some of these guys were working to 5:30, 6. And I was like, I'm enjoying this. I'm just going to stay a wee bit later. And I remember one of the team managers saying, you're going to go far in this business if you keep your attitude like that. And I think that stuck within me. Again, it was they're proud of me. And I like that. I love the joy that I
as humans, we're looking for that. We're looking for a little bit of validation, and that's not to say like the validation of like posting a photo on Instagram and getting the praise, but it's like the hand on the shoulder, say, job well done.
Yeah,
it feels really good.
I really enjoyed that, and then I don't know, that just became ingrained in me. Weirdly enough, I think the younger generations that I saw come into the corporate place as I became a coach, team manager, moved down to England, done all these different things. The younger generation were a wee bit lazier coming in, and I was like, doesn't take hard to say, like, if you want, so it always came down to money. Like, I want more money. It's like, right, okay, you're doing a job that someone that does the same job as you 30 years apart, they're on an old age bracket, so they get 10, 15 grand more than you. I get it, it's not fair, but if you want to climb the ladder, like, it's not very difficult. You just need to kind of show up.
Apply yourself. Yeah. It's cool. And I know one of the stories I've always laughed when you've talked to me about it before is the amount of graft that you did when you were down there on the night shift, but that was towards the back end of
so
the corporate career.
That was a weird time. It was I applied to be a manager maybe 3-4 months in, and I remember I was told, I was like, look, you've not got the experience yet. We'll put you into this coaching role, get your reps in, all that sort of stuff. But I remember him saying, like, one of the youngest managers we've had in this sort of senior management positions, like 28, 29. So that became in my head. I was like, right, that's the goal that I'll work towards. Fast forward, Jill got a graduate job down in England. BT was everywhere. I looked to transfer, joined a site that was rapidly growing, and I managed to land that first management position. I remember I was like, okay, I've made it. And I genuinely loved that role. We'd done that for maybe like 2.5, 3 years all in. Or maybe, it was about 3 years. And then seeing our friends or seeing people around us travel to Australia, I was like, okay, me and Jillian decided we were going to do that. But Jill's mum fell ill. She got diagnosed with breast cancer through a spanner in her work. She's totally healthy and all that now, but at the time, just put a wee bit of pressure because we were living away from home. So Jill initially moved back up. I was looking for roles up here, but in the higher up you kind of go in the leadership roles, it's sort of like one in, one out at that point. Nothing was really coming up, but there was this like night shift role in Sheffield, and it was 4 on, 4 off, and I was like, I could make that work, and convinced myself I was going to buy a flat and rent and all that sort of stuff. But deep down I was like, I could train pure gym. I was doing the math. I was like, I could sleep in my car for this, and landed that role. And I said to Jill, and I was like, don't freak out, but I'm going to, like, 7-hour shifts. You work from 7 in the morning, 7 at night. I'll go to the gym after that, get some food somewhere, brush my teeth, all that sort of stuff. But I can park in the gym, in the work car park. I was like, I'm going to try just sleeping, because you put your head down for a couple of hours and I'm back up in the morning. And she was like, you're mental. And I was like, let me try it. And it worked. And I kept it a secret for family for the whole period.
I was going to say, we talked about
months,
family being wanting the safest outcome for you. It's not that.
For a fact, like, at that point, I think I'm starting to develop into having a lot of confidence in who I am as an individual. So I would have but at the same time, I didn't want them worrying about me. So what doesn't know them doesn't hurt them. I think I was going with that sort of attitude. And it's like, oh, how's the, I think I said I was renting. No, sorry, I said I was getting a hotel every time. It's like, what hotel you staying at? Oh, just an Ibis or whatever, and just played the game. Yeah. But I remember that was a very interesting period of time, because there's a lot of quiet time, just sitting in the car, thinking about life. And I was like, right, cool. And that also put me in a financial bracket I'd never been into before.
Because of the night shift and the seniority?
Yeah, that and the jump in nighttime allowance as well. It's like an extra £11,000 in your paycheck straight away. And I'm sure I went for like numbers, it was like in the like 29 or something with a bonus to like, it was like 39 with a bonus. And I was like, this is crazy, just with one little move. And the job was easier. The job was so easy. Like, people were watching Netflix and all that, but you were there as, like, you know how the other day when that, what was the thing that went wrong?
Oh, the software system. Yeah.
So that was what my job was in BT. If any sort of system went down from a telecoms point of view, we'd have these alerts pop up. We'd have calls with everybody over the business, and then we'd try and fix it. But very rarely does shit hit the fan, but it's a precaution that the business needs to take. So you're paid pretty well for that. And I was like, yeah, I can do this. And that's where my love for podcasts started to rise, and I've had all this free time, 4-hour drive down to Sheffield, the 4 days on of sitting behind a desk, and it's like, right, what do I do? Okay, I'll watch YouTube videos, I'll listen to podcasts, and just consumed a lot of information. And I think that's where more of the self-help stuff or self-development stuff started to come in.
It's really huge, and I say this all the time, we are what we consume, or we become what we consume.
Yep.
And if you choose to, and this is not bashing Netflix in every shape or form, but if you watch 4 hours of Netflix in a night, or you watch 3 hours of a informative or inspirational YouTuber and 1 hour of Netflix, you've automatically switched the dynamic, and you've given yourself an opportunity to develop in a way that you want to develop. Now, doing that consciously is a total game changer, but when you have that more free time and you opted for potentially more challenging to your mindset sources, it's pretty inevitable that your chemistry and your mindset and how you see things is going to start to evolve during that time.
Yeah, and I can't even pinpoint what made me do that. I think I always listened to a fitness podcast, and it was always like, oh, like it would be a dream to do something like that, but I'm comfortable where I am. And the balance of those scales started to tip more and more the more I consumed that information. And I remember on those night shift blocks, I watched Netflix as well, but I remember going kind of bored of watching this program that I really enjoy. I couldn't even tell you what it was, but I just started going, right, let me make a fitness Instagram post. And I think I started writing about why eggs aren't bad for you, or something daft. Like, if you go way back, you'll probably, I don't know how far back you maybe went on Instagram, but there'll be some absolute shockers of Instagram posts. But that started giving me confidence of, can I make this a job? Can I make this a career? But that was from that time in my life, that was another 2, maybe 3 years before I actually made the
These
leap.
things take time, and I think there's that little nagging thought in the back of your head when you're leaving school, as you said, telling people at family parties you want to be a PT, and then there's the route that you've gone down, and it's almost, I don't want to say worse, but it's almost more challenging that you saw progress in that field, because there's a big reason that when somebody's circumstances are absolutely terrible, they make a change far faster than if somebody's circumstances are, and the term is like comfortably numb, or like they're just ticking along, or they're just okay. You're much less likely to like rip the band-aid off and be like, right, fuck it, I'm going to go after this. So sometimes it's like people stay in relationships that are just okay, but then if they were being cheated on, it'd actually be far better, because they would just leave the relationship. They'd be like, okay, it's so bad, it needs to go. And that's the same for so many careers, so many businesses, so many choices, even like from a health perspective. Oh yeah, I'm not too bad. It sometimes takes like a fright in the family for somebody to be like, right, fuck, I actually need to address this. So it's always interesting where you may be ticking along and there's like a cumulative effect. In fact, in this very studio, I sat with Don Cameron from Crypto Glasgow, and he was talking about night shifts being like the crypto guy in the office, and like just consuming all this crypto content and learning about the blockchain, XRP, and being like, this is what I want to do. Yeah. Because he had all that time to himself. So I wonder if it's a night shift thing.
It will be, because there's no, when you kind of break down the night shift role, like, depends on what you do, of course, but it's quiet. It's not the same noise that you get during the day. The world is asleep except you and these group of guys and girls that are paid to do whatever role it is that you're doing. And whether it's the 10-minute break that you have or it's your lunch, you go to that space or you go out a walk, and you just see, if you just kind of listen to the silence, ideas come into your mind. If I don't think you need to be super driven, but you'll find things pop in, and usually that's deep down. I think that's where you start to find who you are and what you enjoy. And what was coming out for me was like, oh, it's nice to begin with, and then we're a couple of months into that role, and I'm like, man, I miss actually not being with Jillian, and it's like, is this a life that I want to live forever? What else could I do? All these things kind of going through my mind, And I think night shift is maybe a cheat code to find your purpose.
100%. I talk about shower thoughts sometimes. See, when you've got no music on in the shower, whatever, you're just left to yourself. A lot of things come up because we've turned the stimulus off, so the input's off. In the same way, some people get really restless thoughts before they go to sleep at night because the devices are off. You're sat there in the dark. There's nothing else there. Your brain's just like, why haven't you thought about this? Why haven't you thought about this? It's like ruminating thoughts. So sometimes when you remove the input or you give yourself some stillness and quiet, and one of the kind of life hacks that one of my kind of more famous guests, Sahil Bloom, recommended was go walk without your phone, without your Apple Watch, without your notifications. Bring like a little notebook with you. And I've done it quite a few times. And sometimes I come back and I look at this notebook and I'm like, I've got much more clarity than I actually thought I did. And I can only imagine that as you're going through that night shift period, you're doing the sleeping in the car, you're training at the Pure Gym, and you're kind of living this life that's a bit odd. You're like, I wonder what lies on the other side of this. I
know I could not predict that this is where I would be, but I remember like going to sleep so I used to go between a Pure Gym and I signed up to a Ballantyne's gym because it was more like
amenities. Yeah.
So like between a
hot shower,
the days and nights that used to come up, you used to have 24 hours, and I was like, right, cool. I could wake up and have a bit of a day to myself. So I'd wake up a wee bit later, drive down there, chill out in the gym, chill out in the spa, and then where it was located was next to services. And I remember pulling my car up and was like, I wonder if this is, and this is where I started to recognise like, this isn't normal for most people to do. It's like, why are you doing this? And it's like, what do you want? And starting to question. It's like, if you can do this just now, like you have good, I knew I had great work ethic. It's like, wonder where my life's going to go. And weirdly enough, I never thought that it would be my own business, my own self-employment journey. I was so like, I don't want to say brainwashed, but I was so committed that I couldn't see anything other than, right, what is the next stage of this corporate ladder that I need to achieve? And as that next part of my journey, fast forward, managed to land a job like at a management level in Openreach, came over to that side of the business and was like, right, cool.
Was that up in Scotland again?
Yeah, so that was in Edinburgh, and we moved in with Jill's mum and stepdad, so we lived there, and it was like, right, cool. And then I was just kind of looking about, and I was like, kind of bored of this role. Like, there's no more. I want more challenge when it comes to leadership. It's like, okay, the next step would be the next step up, and that's where I got promoted again into like the field, but I became an area manager, so more people, larger area, larger numbers, all that sort of stuff. I remember joining like one of the calls, and I was like, this is the same, but just more political bullshit. I was like, is this really what I want? And then combination of COVID happening, I think everyone was just starting to question, right?
Huge reset.
What do we want? If life is so short, like, what do you truly want to do? And that started to eat away at my brain and started to make me think, right, do you do this whole fitness stuff? Because then the compound interest of listening to all those self-development books, podcasts,
coming to the surface,
YouTube,
Dale.
It starts to, it's like the boiling point. And every promotion or every job change that I had, there's this spark of energy, and it lasts for a prolonged period of time, but then it started to die off, and that kind of taught me that I'd learned everything within that role and start to look for another role. And I'd done that a couple of times where the spark died off almost immediately, and I was like, oh, this isn't good.
It's cool to recognise that though, because some people would just continue to chase the next thing. I think that's why humans become addicts. Oh, I'll just take a little bit more of it this time, or I'll just take it a little bit more often. Yeah. It's the same for careers or different highs that we're chasing. Like, we just add a little bit more stimulus and that will fix the problem.
Yeah.
But the problem was you were maybe just playing the wrong sport.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I was like, right, what happens if I put this time and energy into something that really does tie into something that I absolutely love? I love leadership. I love coaching. I was like, but lines and broadbands, telecommunications, I can convince myself that I'm helping the world in a better way, but ultimately I am a cog in the machine at this point, and I have, yes, my cog could turn faster than the rest of the cogs, but ultimately I'm still with it. There's a lot of red tape, as you know, like there's a lot of hoops to jump through, a lot of like political BS that goes on, and it was like, right, let me just do my own thing. And it just became as simple as that. It wasn't a breaking point, it was just, I was actually more nervous of letting the team down that I had just taken over, letting the manager down. It was like, oh man, you're one of the youngest guys that we've ever had in this role, and
that feels great too, and that can sometimes keep people satisfied for a little bit longer. And equally, in a crazy way, there'll be somebody listening to this that maybe that has satisfied you for a longer period of time, but you were noticing as an individual, as Dale Crossar, that I'm getting less and less periods of prolonged satisfaction from these little incremental boosts. I'm kind of running out of road.
Yeah, that, and also the role that I was kind of going into, like, leadership's a fascinating thing to like get your head behind. There's a lot of intricacies and there's a lot of, like, as I said, self-development within that role. I felt like the team that I took over when I was down in England, I got to master that in the short space of time. And mastery is something that obviously continues, but me putting in the work to learn the next skill of leadership was becoming kind of smaller and smaller. And it wasn't that I felt like I had conquered the role, but it was like, right, what is it? Is it just, right, we repeat on our financial year, the numbers we had last year, how do we beat that? Who is in the team that's maybe struggling with the role? And I saw, it's almost like I managed to not future-proof, but
future pace, yeah.
I look 5 years down the line, go, I can already see how this plays out, and what I achieve in those 5 years doesn't really interest me as much. I don't get that same satisfaction. Okay, maybe I'll jump into a different operation, move to a different operation. Okay, there's new intricacies. It becomes the same cycle. And that by the time I had jumped a couple of times, I was like, right, it's
I'm also glad you gave yourself the chance and the opportunity, because I know people that have moved from an operations role to a sales role, and guess what? They're loving their job now. Or they've moved from one industry that was slow and old and boring to an industry that's fast and exciting and growing. They've been like, right, okay, that's what I needed. But sometimes we don't give ourselves the opportunity. Maybe cut off our nose to spite our face. And like, nah, it's all bullshit.
Oh yeah, and I always seen people leave my team over those years to go join another organisation that ultimately was a similar role behind the desk and all this sort of things. And I'd touch base with them, and they're like, yeah, like pretty much the same. And actually, it's a wee bit worse over here. Some of them went on to do great things as well. But I think it's just individualised, isn't it? It's like each to their own. But it's weird how I wanted to give it a chance, because I don't know, I felt like I quite liked the idea of seeing people in my team that had been in the job for 20, 30 years. And in my head, I just thought that would be me. But as I started future pacing this and starting looking, I was like, do I want that? I was like, is that right for me? And what kept me in it so long, again, would be the financial stability that came with that, because I bought a car I really wanted, and I got my dream home, and we were financially in a really good position to go on the holidays that we wanted to go on. But I think the idea of these podcasts that I was consuming, what are they doing with their life? They're helping people with their fitness. They're making people live longer. They're completely transforming people's lives. And I was like, oh man, I'd love to do that. And I always remember every time I put a podcast on, no matter whether it was the drive to work, the drive home from work, or it was on my lunch break, every time I was playing that, the thought of I would love to do that started coming in. So that voice got louder and louder, and it just became... And
COVID allowed you to do a little bit of coaching for the first time?
Yeah.
A little bit of fitness coaching for the first time, sorry.
I think whether COVID happened or not, the role that I was in was more, you can work from home, you can go on site and visit engineers. So I could stay in the house more and manage. I didn't have an office to go to, albeit I could have went to an office. And because I was in the house a lot more, I was like, I think that was just like, I don't want this life. I was like, this isn't. So I actually started visiting a lot of the engineers that I had, and I was like, right, cool. I was like, yeah, I could make this work. And I was like, no, you're trying to convince yourself you could make this work, but I was like, you really want something else. So we just moved into a house, actually. We moved into a beautiful home, and I had a garage, and my dream was always to have a garage set up. So I think every guy wants that when you're working out. COVID hit. We just moved into this house, and I was like, right, let me get some weights for the gym. Done that. As we moved through COVID, started buying more stuff, and I was like, oh, this is like a wee gym setup. And that voice in my head saying, like, if you want to be in this, why don't you try it? So would message friends, and I would throw pictures up of me training in the gym. It's like, oh, lucky you. And I was like, why don't you come round and
have a session?
We'll have a session. And then that became, I think it was Jill's sister was one of my first quote unquote clients, who was like, yeah, like, I don't know what I'm doing, try and teach me. And it was like I'd been doing it my whole life. It just became so natural. I think I had all this years of experience of how to communicate with someone. Yes, the actual fitness side of things I felt pretty competent in, but I didn't lack any confidence. I wasn't nervous. It just felt right. That became a friend of Gillian's, and then it became my friends, and then brothers of friends, and then it was like, right. And I'm doing my day job at the same time, like similar to the position you're in. Like, I had a lot of flexibility in my schedule to go, yeah, I can take you at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Was it the right thing to do? Maybe not, but I always worked to make sure that the corporate side was dealt with and I wasn't taking the piss.
Your deliverables were there, which I think is key. And I think, are you telling me that somebody doesn't nip out to the shops during the afternoon?
They would, people would pick their kids up at like 2, and those who had
it just so happens that you're picking your kids up turns out to be your coach doing a gym session.
I'm doing my own thing, but weirdly enough, like, I had 6 months sick pay, and I always remember people saying, "Oh, you should milk that." And in my head, I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to do that." I can never bring myself to do it, and I think
you don't have that kind of character, and that's not to. Well, actually, I'm going to be fair. I think the kind of people that do that, I think they're morally, that will come back to haunt you, like from a karma perspective, potentially, but it wouldn't sit well with me. And I think the kind of character that I've got to know that you have, it would just eat away you a little bit. You'd be like, I can't believe I'm doing this.
I didn't really understand what the word integrity meant. I always used to hear this in some podcasts, and I was like, what does that mean? I remember going, right, I could just phone in sick for this week and get paid my full salary
and do all my coaching.
And I was like, that's not me. I was like, what? I don't feel right. There's just something in my gut that tells me that's not the right thing to do. And I've trusted my gut through this whole kind of self-employment business, and it's done me well. So instinctual, I think deep down we all know what's the right thing to do. Sometimes it might not end up being it, but you just need to follow that. You need to go with that. So, and
am I right in saying those early PT sessions were £11 an hour?
If that, yeah. So I think it worked out to about £11. I was doing them for free, right? Really, I wanted to do them for free, but I think just because it was friends and all that, they wanted to pay something. So I was like, right, cool. How many times you want to come round? Right, see you twice a week, 3 times a week. Right, cool. Gives 20 quid, 25 quid or whatever it was. And that sort of snowballed. Actually, weirdly enough, like, even when I was ready to go into the gym, I was like, I would do this for free. I was like, I love doing this. And I thought, like, I would just naturally charge more and more, which I did eventually, but it just it felt so right. I was like, for the role that I was doing.
It's really cool. It's really cool to see that level of passion, though, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. And then that's what now looking back, I know, like, that's what passion is. Didn't really understand at times, like, why do I have so much energy? Like, how can I have it's like the honeymoon period's going to wear off, or you'll not be able to do 10 sessions a day forever. And it's like, okay,
watch me.
Let me enjoy it then. Yeah, also the watch me, it's like, see the fact that you've said that now, it's like, oh, that wall's got white paint on it, don't touch it. It's like, oh, what, can I fucking touch it now? You know what I mean?
The temptation's there. Like, I respect that. So how did it evolve then, and what's the tipping point to decide to leave the full-time and go Coach Crossar, Fitness Crossar?
It was, well, me and Gillian been together for 12, coming up 13 years. We were getting married the following year. COVID kind of postponed it a year. And in amongst all that, she went through her, like, payoffs and her role. And I thought, okay, I'm in a really good role, company car, all this sort of stuff. I was like, but I don't need the company car was more of the appeal to get that role. And as soon as I got it, I was like, this isn't what I want from life. I thought I wanted the status, the financial status, whatever. So I kind of said to her, I was like, I kind of really want to give this PTing role a shot. She had my back 100%. And I was like, right, that's all I needed to know. But I wanted to be smart with the money side of things. And I wasn't really materialistic after I bought an Audi A7 when I first got my big pay rise, and then I got it, and a week into it I was like, that sort of feeling's worn off. I thought this would last longer. So I think very early on, materialistic stuff didn't appeal to me. I had a gaming PC that I bought again. I was like, okay, that served its purpose.
There was an itch that you needed to scratch, and I think sometimes we need to scratch those itches before we decide that, okay, I'm quite happy at this level. I'm going to stick here.
Yeah, so I managed to save up like 3 months worth of bills relatively quickly.
Emergency fund is the term that all the finance guys have taught me on the podcast.
Yeah, and in my head it was like, right, okay, that's the kind of smart decision to do. I obviously listening to other PTs in the space and consuming a fitness podcast. They had mentioned if they had to do it now, what they would do. And callers would call in, it's like, I want to transition away from my job. So I'd heard a lot of the stuff. I was like, okay, that makes sense to me. Let me do that. So it was as simple as that, and handed my notice in. With my notice being handed in, I think I had like 40 days annual leave saved up, because the plan was when we get married, go away for a month, and all of that was sitting there. So I ended up staying. And again, I only had a month's notice, but the people pleaser in me, I handed that notice in, and he's like, could you help us out? So I stayed for like 3 months. Stayed, notice went in August, stayed till October, and I managed to still be paid until December, I think it worked out at. So I had a good bit of flexibility within that. And yeah, it just became, right, what am I doing? Am I going to work in a garage or am I going to work in a gym? It seemed a no-brainer to find a gym and understand what that world looked like, and just approached a new gym that was opening up. I was training a friend's girlfriend, and she was like, oh, there's a gym opening up in Wishaw. And I liked the idea of where I grew up.
So you're from there initially?
So that's where I went to it school. Mum and dad split up, it was like Hamilton, Straven, Wishaw was it. So in that much, but high school was where I went. People always knew me as the fitness guy in high school. And I thought that should be easy to build. My idea was to build a brand, I wanted to be known as not Dale that worked for BT Openreach. Dale is a personal trainer now. And I thought, let me go where people know me. And as I start to take on clients, then I can build that brand. So I really wanted that job in Wishaw, and I was like, I don't know, I don't even think it was cockiness. I was just convinced if I go in here and just be the nice people pleaser guy that I am, then hopefully they see something in me. And that's all I done. I just went
bring the passion.
Yeah, I just
I want to do this for free.
My game plan was that obviously I listened to these fitness podcasts, and one of them is Mind Pump. I just thought everyone in fitness listened to them. So I remember going in, I was like, if they know I listen to Mind Pump, then surely they know how dedicated I am. So that's, I think at the time, 1,500 episodes of a fitness podcast. That shows dedication and passion towards something. So I went in, got a day pass, started working out, and seeing the owner, which I didn't know at the time, cleaning the machine. And I was like, I'm looking for the owner. And he's like, oh, that's me. And I was like, I've just recently got my PT qualification. I've quit my corporate job. I want to make this personal training side of things. I've trained people in my garage, yada yada. And he was like, all right, let's have a chat. And I was like, do you listen to Mind Pump? He's like, never heard of them. And I was like, oh shit. I was like, pure throw.
That was one of your big things. You were like
it was almost like, I'll not need to say much, because if I say this, then he knows these guys have made a business and have been in fitness for 30 plus years. Then if my methods of training are from them, it validates your skill. It kind of like, it's not just, oh, you're a PT that's in the game for, I don't know, to get some chicks and money and stuff like that. Like, that's not, obviously that's a reputation that PTs can have.
Yep.
And yeah, just had a conversation with him. He's like, come in for an interview. I was like, cool. So I suited and booted up, and he's like, why are you dressed so well? And I was like, it's an interview. So I think just that, he's kind of seen the
how you do anything is how you do everything, to some extent, in my opinion. And I think you are somebody that brings a level of like positive excitement. And most people who want to do really well actually appreciate that. And I think if I think back to when we first met through Young Entrepreneurs Society, probably, you bring a great positive energy. That's the kind of people that you're happy to be around. Whereas the guy that's maybe like mopey or down or thinks he's too cool for the situation, that's not who I typically would surround myself with, if I'm honest.
First impressions, you don't get a second stab at a first impression. And I remember that from the days that I interviewed people for roles within my team, through all the events I've been to, all the sites that I'd went to, like anytime I was interacting with someone higher or lower, or like, it doesn't matter where it was, that always that was drilled into me, like, present yourself well. So I knew I was kind of semi good at communication, good at I knew I was a hard worker. So I think knowing I had that skill, it didn't matter what it was.
You had something to lean on that was tangible, and every business owner values somebody that is willing to graft and put in the work. And if you think about the level of excitement and passion and dedication you had for training people in the garage, you were just going to bring that to another area, and you were going to be like, right, I'm just going to apply myself here as well. And things moved really, really quick.
Yeah, they moved rapidly. So, and I think that's also a testament to the place that I chose to work. It was a small family business, and they run their gym extremely well. I mean, for any gyms that operate and stand toe to toe with like your Pure Gyms, your JDs, your Everlast or whatever, like the big corporate chains, it's very hard to kind of stand out amongst them, and to this day they do a fantastic job of that. So I like the fact that it was family run business. It was even better that I built a really good relationship with the manager, or sorry, the gym owner, should I say. And he had 2 young kids. This was his life and his soul, was this business. And I don't know, I always watched him. I was like, man, that's what I want my life to look like, but I need to work on myself at the same time. So found myself kind of helping him out, doing extra hours, taking classes, but not taking any paid salary, because I had this kind of cash flow, and that goodwill that I accrued, I think, put me in a good light for him. He always kind of used to bounce off me, like, not to like slag him or anything, but in terms of like managing people or coaching individuals or leading an operation, he was a PT his whole life.
You had more. You genuinely had 8-9 years of Openreach experience doing that. you just happen to do it in a different field. So you actually brought a level of expertise. Like, age is no guarantee of experience in any shape or form. In fact, many people have the same job for 35 years, as you were talking about. So if you put them into a different arena, you'd be like, okay, they can bring the skill set from that one very narrow area of expertise to this other area, and you're thinking, okay, what else have you got? Whereas you'd done numerous different roles, a lot of the managerial, you could bring that to this space and be like, oh, well, this is how I would approach things.
And him and his wife definitely leaned me on a lot, and how to have like conversation with people that weren't necessarily pulling their weight. And just like, I started getting into this operation role within his club. Simple things like, I don't know, it just seemed natural to me that every person that walks through the door, say hi, how are they? Because I know how nervous people can be. And I was trying to build my clientele, trying to be known as this good PT. So all that was drilled into me, and that worked well in his favour for the operations. But in return, he also shared a lot of stuff on the cost, the overheads, all these sort of things that I wanted to understand from running your own gym. And I think I was 8 months in. Yeah, I was about 8 months into this role of going through my own sort of experiences, building my own clientele up. And within those first 8 months, I had a client of mine's husband, Scott, who owns Rivals, asked to meet with me for a coffee and offered me to have my own gym. Like, that happened so rapidly. And thinking back, I was like, that is nuts how quick that happened. But again, all of that was from a bunch of micro decisions that I made, and a ton of goodwill and a ton of like putting out stuff to get no return in. So there's a ton of free sessions in that, spending hours and hours on the gym floor, just try to be a good person to make an impact. Because my whole goal was like, I want to do this to make an impact in the fitness space. I want more people to be living longer, feeling stronger, and feeling healthier and fitter, because I generally get so much joy from that. And I would have 10 PT sessions in a day, and by the last PT session, it wasn't like, oh, thank God this is my last one. It's like, oh man, I can't wait to get back in here tomorrow and do this all again. Like, generally was my thoughts.
I say this on lots of podcasts, and I think I borrowed it from Chris Williamson on Modern Wisdom, but quite often the tools will be heavy, but they'll feel light in your hands. And that's when you know you've found something that is really hard work to other people, but it's still work to you, but it's more like play at times. And that is a really deadly combination to find. So for example, I'm so excited to do this 7th or 8th training session a day with this client, probably do some of the same movements that I've done with other clients, but I'm really excited to do it. That's a competitive advantage if you're thinking about how other people feel going into that. In the same way, you and I, I'm sure we'll speak about podcasting as this goes. We're hundreds of episodes deep into our podcast when the vast majority of podcasts fail. Because a lot of the time it doesn't feel like work. We're doing things because we enjoy it. We like doing the reps. We like doing the process. We like following through on it. That's fantastic. So finding those little areas where you can do things that other people find particularly hard, and yes, they may be hard at times for you, but the majority of the time you feel like you can push through them and you get that positive feedback loop. That is where you want to apply yourself. That's your again, a guy called Sahil Bloom, again, to hark back to him, calls it the zone of genius. Find your zone of genius and just apply yourself relentlessly.
That's what it felt like to me. I think because I spent the previous 8 years maybe it's always been an aspiration from a young age, from leaving high school. So the seed's in there. And then over the years, it's getting watered, and there's bits as I learn about my own fitness journey, as I go into the bodybuilding side of things, as I start to learn about mobility. Like, I'm in the gym floor, and I made the switch from training at night to training first thing in the morning, only because the nighttime working out was just horrendous, the whole 5 to 6 window. I remember driving into the car park, couldn't get parked, and I was like, that's enough, I'm away home. And I was like, let me just get up a bit earlier. It's a 24/7 gym. So I remember training first thing in the morning, and I remember the gym it was Pure Gym in Edinburgh. I can't remember the side of it. One of the Pure Gyms in Edinburgh. I remember sitting there and working out, and then seeing the first PT take their first client at like 6 in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, and I'd see the same guy all the time. He'd be training his client, and I remember just going, man, I'd do that. I'd love to do that. And I remember muting my headphones and hearing how he spoke to them, the conversations have, the questions she was asking. I was like, I know all the answers to. Not that I know the answers, like I would be able to give her an answer on that. It's like, man, I wonder if I could do that. I could do that. And that was maybe 2 years prior to actually making the leap for it. So we have
different personality types. Somebody like yourself needed a body of evidence to take the jump. And I think it's really cool that before you left Openreach, you'd done some coaching in the garage, you'd listened to all this content, you'd heard these different scenarios, and you'd had that level of reassurance, because reassurance is key for a lot of people to be willing to go forward, whereas there's other people, and I'm sure you've spoken to them on your podcast and I've spoken to them on mine, that are like, fuck it, burn the boats, let's go.
Yeah.
I'm not wired like that. And a lot of people that listen to these podcasts are sometimes a bit more analytical as well, and they want that data, they want that reassurance. It's great when somebody explains that's how it went for them, because other people, and I think in entrepreneurial space, it's fetishized to be like a bit reckless. And I've got huge respect for the people that do that, because sometimes those guys get to the top even faster.
Yeah, they are just wired differently. And I think that's also why I never took the sick pay kind of thing, because I knew I could get a job back in BT Openreach. That was also a safety net. It was like I'd left with
how you leave matters. It really does.
I had such good relationships. But also, like, weirdly enough, I'd spent 7-8 years in this business, and when I left, I thought there would be like a bigger parade when I left, and it was like, that like laptops off, nothing really. Like, I think it was the type of role I was in as well, because when I left the site in Nottingham, I think I made a really positive impact with the team that I had, the growth of the site, the sales.
You were more office based then, weren't you? So you probably spent more time. There's greater connection. I completely see that. I also know from, again, I'm 31 now, so worked in a few different roles, few different companies. You are so replaceable. Yeah. In sales, it's slightly different, because there is an element of customers know you. So like, I order from Colin, I don't order from whatever the company's name is. Yeah. And there's a bit of a personality cult there, but you are very replaceable. Somebody else is going to step into those shoes. The site I left in Nottingham, I remember, like, people who had been in the business for 30 years and had multiple different managers, like, the first one coming up to me and saying, "You are generally the best manager I've ever had." And I'm like, yeah, okay, thank you, blah, blah. You say that to everybody. But hearing that so often throughout my career, I was like, maybe I still never believed it, but looking back, I can reflect now and go, there's a skill set there.
Yeah, like there was something there. But leaving that site in Nottingham, because it was so office based, they all printed my face off, and they had a personal touch. They had like the Scottish Iron Brew and all that, and I was like, I was expecting that when I left BT, but that was like, right. I was like, right, you know what? That's actually confirmed that I'm going to make this work, especially with the comments that were being made as I leave. So, we'll see you back in 3 months, blah, 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 like all the...
Oh, interesting. A little bit of fuel for the fire?
That, and people always like to weigh in their opinions. I don't think they mean any harm with it, but it's like the nature of the world that we live in, particularly on the west coast of Scotland. It's like, that's a big jump, that's risky. Have you got enough savings? And it was like, I know such and such who became a PT, but they never worked out.
And in fairness, PT... the lifespan for a lot of people that try it is really volatile, and a lot of people get into it for the wrong reasons. And some of the boxes that you ticked are the boxes that other people. I love training. Yeah. Okay, cool, but you love coaching people. It's so different. Yeah. it's so different
when you're in the world of even the role that I done. I was very good at the role that I done. And I seen multiple managers that moved from the role that they were really good at into that management or coach position, and it's like, they dropped down. They became the best operator on the calls to the worst coach and manager, because there's different skills that you had. And it's the same with PTing. It's like, you go from training, being able to get yourself in really good shape, but then when you have to coach others and teach others, with like half the time it's not even coaching them on the lifts, it's getting them through the doors. Like all these sort of things. Like, what do you mean you can't train? Like, just train. Like, that was never a mentality.
Very different. Yeah. Very, very different. So very quickly, you get the opportunity to come and have this space that we sit in today. What enabled you to make that move? So
a sprinkle of luck, I think. You need to, like, I managed to, so if I kind of rewind and I try and unpack how that opportunity came about. Simply, I was coaching someone, and in that relationship that I had with Kerry, her husband ran this facility called Rivals. They had a place in Wishaw. They opened a place in East Kilbride, and someone approached them that they had this unit here. They were going to open a third one, but they didn't need this whole other half of the building that we sit in. And he was just sitting one night and was like, I wonder what we do with this space. And Kerry, the client that I had, was like, Dale's really like I don't know what word she'd use. I don't think it was entrepreneurial.
Aspirational, probably.
I think it was maybe aspiration or driven. I was like, why don't you speak to him? So he sat me down, and instantly I was like, JD, I knew, so there's a JD down in Coatbridge, so it's maybe about 2 miles of here, 1.5 miles. And I knew that was opening. And straight away in my head, knowing that I'd had a good clientele in Gym 24, I was really close with the owners. If anything, I thought my path would be open a second Gym 24 with the owner because we were so close, and this would be my shot at owning my own gym. And I thought, you know what, I was like, there's no point opening a gym because the space, I came and saw it and all that sort of stuff. It wasn't big enough to compete against this big corporate machine.
It's a behemoth, yeah.
And I was almost writing it off, but in my head, again, the experience of the fitness content that I consumed, I started playing different ideas in my head and thinking, right, do I run it as a big personal training studio? At this time as well, I'd started podcasting. I think me and James only sat down and recorded 1 or 2 episodes. So straight away, idea one was have your own studio, buy your own cameras. You don't have the expense of paying out. It's like, okay, that saves a bit of money. Because at the end of the day, it always came back to, okay, yes, I have my clients, but how do I keep enough clients to keep the cost of a gym open? So understood like what it costs to rent a unit. And that's as simple as was. What's rent? Cool. Right. Let me see if I can make this work. And I started seeing the vision of my own studio, but it was never like a gym. Where my brain was going was this place to record content and help a larger audience of people. That's really what it defaulted to, and to also train my clients in. It's like, it was never to be a group.
It wasn't a gym where somebody could come in and do their
so,
session on a Friday evening or Saturday morning.
No, and that was because I was in a gym and I could see the headache and the stress and the sort of intricacies that is needed to run an actual facility.
And have a membership.
Yeah. And he brought in a good amount of money. It wasn't as if money was tight, but it was just the headache and stress of it took me away from coaching. Like running a gym is different to actual coaching individuals. And I'm only in my first year of coaching at this point. It's like, that's what I love to do. And I had opportunities to become the ops manager of Gym 24. Like, he was very open. He's like, I'd love you to do this.
The skill set was there.
Yeah. And I was like, you know what, let me do this and PT. But if you had to catch me 5 years ago, I would be all about this role. But I've done it. And again, I was always future pacing. I was like, I know exactly what that's going to be. I'm not going to be doing what I want to do. And I had to decline it. I had to be a bit selfish and kind of look after what I wanted. So that's where the vision started to piece together for that. And it was like, you know what? Rent for what this building is relatively cheap in comparison to what my gym rent is. I was like, okay, right, would clients move over with me? It's like, if they don't, am I confident enough I can get more clients? It's like, yep, right, cool, that's it. Like, let's just go with it.
And because you'd started Bulletproof Mindset as a podcast with James, you would have been renting another studio, as you said. Mm-hmm. The idea of straight away when you saw this space was gym space out there for training clients, and then here was going to be the podcast studio. Yeah,
so that idea probably came up before I got the space, because we were renting from G4
in Wishaw, yeah.
G24, Gym 24 is the gym, G4. So very good relationship with them. They were very forthcoming with like the setup, and we started to take on the editing just from a cost perspective. And as I was learning the editing, I was like, like for what we're paying, I was like, all we really need is cameras, because I've learned the hard bit, and I actually enjoyed that bit because I had a bit of history of doing edits on gaming videos and all that in the past. So that kind of,
I remember hearing you were into your Twitch stuff.
Oh yeah, so streamed on Twitch and used to make little clips from that. So that, again, that skill became, it was a headache to learn, but once you got it, it was there. And I got that skill maybe within the first 10 episodes, multi-camming, making sure. The only thing we didn't really understand was the setup of the cameras, and that came with its own learning curveballs, but we got there.
Yeah, starting an episode without one filming.
Oh yeah, like not hitting record on the audio, and then you're like, oh damn it, the camera's like overheating, like making sure you got enough memory on the SD. Tons of different things. But it just became, I remember editing in one of our episodes, and I was like, we could do this in the room. I was like, it's different if we got guests on, but our whole strategy, there wasn't much strategy. It was just, we're going to try and do this for 100 episodes and see if we're any good at it. And it was that simple. So when I seen this space, I was like, right, can make a podcast room. These sort of wall panels that you see, I had some of these in my gaming room. So I'd already started to envision what my podcast studio would look like. And that was it. That's really where the idea was born of like, okay, let's build the podcast studio, and that we'll just sort of learn everything else from there.
It's really cool. And over 200 episodes into your own podcast now, some changes along the ways I'm sure we'll talk about, but what a journey.
I know, it's crazy. So those 200 episodes, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but episode 200, I went through every minute and I was like, okay, 100 minutes. So it's like
I think it's like 225, 230 hours or something you had, which is wild. And I would have been similar for that sort of length, because most episodes were about an hour and 10 minutes, something like that.
And we only started doing guest episodes maybe the back half of the later half of the hundreds. That was approaching the 200 mark. It was something that we wanted to do, but we also wanted to find our feet with the episodes that we were doing. And like hitting the 200 number, you envision something different, which becomes reality, and you're like, it's just an arbitrary number. But at the same time, I thought things would be further forward. In all honesty, I thought, I said it in the 200 episode, I thought there would be more status, there would be a financial aspect, and I was like, when I broke down the amount of hours that went into that, I realised how much of a novice I still am at it, and that excited me. I was like, wow, still got a long way to go. Having David on the podcast, he has I think he said it was a 15-year goal. And I had to remind myself that even though I hit 200 episodes, which is great to show up every single week and release,
you did it really quick as well, because your frequency is really high, which is impressive.
Yeah, so that too, and then I thought to myself, like, it was never about reaching 200 episodes. It was I actually sat down and was like, can I do this for 5 to 10 years without seeing a return on it to see if I'm any good at it? And I was like, I'm only 18 months into this process.
It's a great approach, and it's a big reason why so many podcasts fail.
Yeah,
because they expect something mad.
Same with PT, and same with probably most professions. If you're looking for the return too soon, the scales are tipped too much to one side, and as you don't see that reward come through, then you're like, what's the point?
You dabbled in the property space, for example, and that's a space where there's a lot of impatient young guys that expect quick riches. And I recently spoke to John Morris, who runs a auction house, Prime Property Auctions, and he's got a couple of guys that did the sourcing for a couple of years, didn't make the mega money that the guys that they really looked up to in the space did, and now they're just pursuing this sales career within this. He's given them like a vehicle, and they're making better money than they ever could. That's what I mean. And they're building a skill, and you're like, okay, sometimes you get distracted by the shiny thing, and it might be something to do with the thing that you want to do, but it's not that. No. And it's not the way that the idol does it, because by the very nature, that idol that you're looking up to is probably an outlier. That's why social media is pushing them. Yeah.
So if I kind of look at my journey, as like, my idol in the sense was to try and replicate something that the Mind Pump Studios done, what those guys done. They had
2 guys, is it, in America?
3? Yeah, well, it was 3 guys that talk on the podcast. So there's 4 of them. So they're all equal share owners, and they started this thing called Mind Pump. And I listened from episode 1 and seeing their journey, I was like, wow, I'd love to have something like that, because there's nothing like the information that they give out was top quality, and it just made sense. It connected with me more. But America's different to what we do here in the UK, and there's always something like they would talk about nutrition, for example, and some of the things I was like, don't really. I started finding myself getting my own opinion. I was like, okay, maybe I could do this whole podcast thing, because at the start I was like, it'd be cool to podcast, but what's the point? They're already podcasting. And then as I started to listen to their callers call in, and they would push a fitness question out, I'd hear how they answers. Like, I start weighing in my opinions. Like, I've actually got a different opinion. And then I started to realise, okay, we're all unique in our own way, and we've all got our own impact that we can make on making the world a healthier, fitter, and stronger place. So I was like, right, why don't I do this whole podcast game? And I put it off for ages. I actually made the banner and made the logo, the Coach Crossar podcast.
Oh, really? So there was one that was in the works before you and James took the jump?
Yeah, so
I'm relating hard to this, man.
So it always made sense. I was like, get a couple of years of PT under your belt. Once you get that, save up enough funds, you'll have your own studio within the first 5 years, and then you can maybe start putting out podcast stuff. In about up until maybe 3-4 months into the role, I was like, I should start recording podcast episodes and answering the same questions that all my clients are in. So the idea was there, and I was like, right, I've got
becomes
this.
An evergreen library you can refer to.
Yeah. So, and again, that was like strategies that the top fitness people in the space would always recommend you do. So I'm thinking to myself, right, let's start doing this. I've got a studio set up in my house, my Twitch set up. That's ideal. And it's like, right, cool, you should do this. It's like, what should I call it? Right, the Coach Crossar podcast. This was in like June time. So we just came back from, we were getting married in May. Nearly forgot the date there. Get married at the end of May, honeymoon June. Came back, I was like, right, that's a game plan. Teased it out to my Instagram. And James just moved to the gym I was working in. And when James came in there, he was the first PT that had a drive to make content in the gym. I was, not that any other PTs weren't doing it, but he became like the friendly competition of, oh, James is making a video today, I need to make a reel on helping people with their fitness stuff, because then I'm slacking.
He knew the power of short form.
Yeah, so he was very new to it at the same time. So then he was making a reel and we were making it at the same time. And I knew there was a bit of, I don't know, it's like what he tells me now, which is quite funny to look back on, is like anytime he was trying to do something, everyone was always like, oh, Dale does that. And he's like, Dale. But he never hated me. Like, as we met, we got to know each other and we clicked really well. And we're making a video one day and he was making it on, I can't remember what it was. And I was like, do you want to make a reel together? And we just started making these stupid, light-hearted reels. It got a good engagement, all this sort of stuff. And that's how the relationship started. We then got invited on to Gavin's podcast just because one of our reels went off and he dived into both our stories. I'm learning about James on this podcast. Our relationship's still fairly new. And off the back of that, I was like, that was class. He's like, same. And I says, look, I've been wanting to start a podcast. You want to join in on it? I was like, happy to start with you. And he's like, why me? And I was like, come on, like, why don't we just do it? Because we're disagreeing on whether you should win rep max or not. And I remember us going back and forth and I was like, this would be a great podcast episode. And it was as simple as that. When it came, I already, in my head, I was like, what could the branding be called? I didn't want it just to be Coach Crossar. And I always liked the idea of Bulletproof. It was like, it doesn't need to be like this. I don't know. It was just something like, I liked that name. It was as simple as that. So I was like, why don't we make it, I think it was like Bulletproof Uncensored that started with. And it was like, what was the other name he had? He had a name like Raw. It's like Raw Chat or Raw Talk because he had no filter. Yep. And then we decided mindset has to be in it because mindset is everything. So we went Bulletproof Mindset and that was it.
Cool name.
And we just sat down.
Do you know what? The most important thing is that you did the reps thereafter. Yeah.
Your brand becomes what you make it. It doesn't matter like the logo. I think we get so caught up in the font, the logo, the what's the animation going to be? Like, you get caught up in all this noise when in the reality is like, just start it.
In the early days, you just need to get better at having conversations as well. Absolutely. And just start recording them and releasing them.
So yeah, that's how the podcasting side thing. So as we're invited on Gavin's podcast and mine and James's relationship starts, like, we sit down, we record the first episode, we're getting a ton of hype, a ton of support from the gym that we're working in. Literally like a week after that, the opportunity comes up with me to own my own place, and I'm like, right, okay, what do I do here? And I actually said to James, I was like, you're like a month and a half, and he didn't have the experience I had in the corporate place. He had this doing a job he didn't love, and he's like, I want to just PT, I want to do something. And so I said to him, I was like, do you want to do this together? And I could see he was really nervous too, and I was like, right, I don't know if he's ready to do that. Why don't I do it? And I was like, if you want to come over, by all means come over. We can still keep the podcasting going, or you can stay where you are. So he made the decision to come over, pay a little bit of rent towards it. That didn't last too long because he was relying on that foot traffic coming in from the public gym. It wasn't coming in here. And he ended up going over to JD, working there, which I think was the best thing.
But the podcast has started though, and it was running and moving.
He came, we would do 2 episodes a week, and he would come over. In fact, he spent most of his time here. If he wasn't here, he was in JD. And I kind of went back and forth for a couple of months, maybe the first 6 months of the setup, but setting up the place, I think this is where the writing was maybe on the wall, that the commitment might not have been there forever because he was dealing with his own things, worried about not having enough clients and all these sort of things, going through his own dramas. And I got this place and had to rip it out, paint the walls, do everything. I thought he would be there more, but then when I look back, it's like, that's my baby. It was my
it was your thing, and it takes a lot to wanky corporate term to take you back. Have a helicopter view.
Yeah.
So zoom out and say you were this, or a helicopter, a fucking flying saucer. You're an alien looking above, and you're looking down at Dale and his actions and what he's doing. It makes much more sense if you withdraw from it. Whereas you're in the thick of it, you're like, well, of course, James should want to be doing this with me. But if you withdrew, removed all emotion, all circumstance, all social norms, you'd be like, that's Dale's thing. No wonder he's putting in the graft and he's willing to paint the walls at midnight when he should be going home to his bed because he's building something.
Yeah, and that's what I had to reflect on, because during the time there was a lot of like, I was like, why does he not care as much? And I never really communicated that to James in the early days, but looking back at it, it kind of makes sense why. Not that, well, yeah, he just wasn't, he had his dream, he had his aspirations, and the podcast was a part of that, but the deeper he got to his roots, the further away he was from actual
the priority
podcasting.
principle comes through, and James needs to spend as much of the energy that he can allocate on the things that really, really matter. And when it came down to the crunch, ultimately the podcast is probably something that is more of a passion project for you.
Yeah, and sometimes time just needs to, you just need time to pass for it to iron itself out. So that was...
You did hundreds together, 180 odd together?
Yeah,
that's a lot.
182 episodes together. So that's what, if we do 2 episodes a week, it's kind of well over a year of doing it together. And never missing a beat, never missing a week, whether there was a holiday coming up or...
You just pre-recorded enough, yeah, respect that a lot.
And then when we came back, it was like, sometimes we were recording the night before and we just... And I think, see, when I look at that, if it wasn't up for me, that consistency wouldn't have happened. So that's what I mean, there was like these little nuggets and writing on the wall of, is it because he doesn't care or is it because he doesn't want to be a podcaster, which again, coming to those crossroads was totally fine to do, but it was like, bugger. Because
it's uncomfortable, you don't want to lose it because while there's elements of, if you'd started the show yourself, I'm sure it would have been in a similar place that it is now, maybe even a better place, who knows. But having a co-host is really helpful because you both sit down, hit record. Yeah. James got a personality that's really easy to bounce off. That's easier in some senses than the solo ones that you're now doing. Absolutely. But now the experience you've got at a year, 2 years of podcasting, of course the solo episodes are way easier, but see at the start, I reckon it'd be more intimidating.
Yeah, for sure. I think I've put more work into the last 30, 40 episodes that I have into the first 180.
It's mad, isn't it?
And that kind of goes to show is like, right, this is a good thing this happened.
In the way that it did?
I would be lying if I said it absolutely would have been better if I just went in solo and went for it. But then I wouldn't have this fantastic relationship with James. We wouldn't have been as close because he's a very unique person. And I think that's the bit that I'm kind of, I still would love to have him as a co-host, but it's not it's not right for him. And I think that's the bit that hurt the most from it. It's looking at going, we had a fantastic relationship. We probably won't be as close as we were because we're not sitting down having these in-depth conversations. Yeah. And I think when I see where I want the podcast to go and looking down 5 years, 10 years, I wanted to share it with someone. And I think again that's because the role models I have in the space, they have a good chemistry between them. And I'm like, I'm not going to have that. And it's a little bit, it feels a little bit sad because it's like I wanted someone to be there with.
That's funny because I was listening to podcasts that were hosted by one person, so it is a massive part of what you consume and your expectations and your role models. In the same way, at 16, 17, 18, you didn't have that older PT role model to say, he's got a career in that at 30, 35, 40, that makes sense. In the same way, you're listening to podcasts, you're like, the Mind Pump guys, there's 3 of them. Of course, that's the model for how I should podcast.
And that's why
we need something to aim for, Dale.
You kind of, you need to visualize something, and you can't visualize what you don't know. So that's why I never started the Coach Crossar podcast. That was always going to be something that did start. And I remember saying to Jillian through this, I was like, you know what, I would really like a co-host with this. And she's like, what about this person who was creating stuff online? We sort of knew each other just through the whole Instagram game. And I was like, maybe, and I was almost close to reaching out to someone, and then me and James started doing the stuff together, and we just clicked. It just felt so natural. It felt like I knew this guy whole life. We were very similar in terms of interest, but also different in terms of we could have a respectful debate with it, and we had good chemistry, and we just clicked. And I think that's why it lasted as long as it did. Anyone else, maybe that would have been a lot of a shorter fuse. But yeah, as much as I would have liked to start myself, I'd be lying if I said I wouldn't. I'm still kind of grateful for having that whole journey. Yeah,
there's a whole cheesy phrase, don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. And it sometimes phrases like that, they just resonate and you're like, makes sense, and you leave it with a lot less bitterness. But in terms of like an actual personal development tool, I do not recommend everyone starts a podcast, although I think there's plenty of room for you to all get involved. I really do think you learn so much about yourself because you have to be incredibly introspective, but also incredibly interested in topics or other people. What have been the big things that you've learned over the last 200 odd episodes? I know you've done your lessons show.
So, of podcasting alone. Yeah. So, for me, there's a couple of things that come to mind. So, podcasting in itself, like communicating about a certain topic, just refining that skill. Like how rare do you get the chance to listen back to you having a conversation? Imagine every time you sat down with your mates, and I'm sure it might even be Chris Williamson, or maybe
one of his prescriptions is to do a 30-minute podcast a week. Yeah,
don't release it, but record your conversation that you have and then play it back to yourself. The first time you do that, it always goes over that, oh, I hate my voice, hate this, oh, why do I look that way? But eventually it becomes, I thought I said something different. I thought I communicated that better. And you get to work on this skill of the way you present yourself. And that has to be the best thing you can get from podcasting alone. When it comes to interviewing and conversating with someone that you don't know, so the guest interviews that I do now, again, like the whole art of diving into someone's story and navigating the journey through it. You think, like, sometimes I'll come away from a podcast and I'm like, but this used to happen with James. We would do a podcast and I'm like, we need to start prepping more for these because I don't feel like we've done a good job there. And to edit, and I'd be listening back and I'd be going, find myself laughing. I'm like, that's a really good podcast. And that's where I started to say, right, this skill is compounding. And I don't think you ever complete it. You just get better and better and better until take it to new heights. So just the whole conversation that, like, we are human beings, we crave connection and likability and all this sort of stuff. And I would say some things I'm like, nah, that's not how you should be communicating that, whether it was how I explain fat loss, muscle building, nutrition, like a habit. I'm like, I've not really came across well there. And equally, it's been a great thing for mine and Jillian's relationship because I actually found myself talking about stuff in there, and she's my biggest supporter, and she would say to me, so you never really told me about that. And it's like, wow, I'm opening up way more on this podcast platform than I am in my personal life.
Bro, start a podcast rather than go to therapy. Yeah. It's a meme, but it's true.
No, it's absolutely true. So there's tons of things like that's became like wins in life. So yeah, that has to be the two best things. Even if it's just that you're recording yourself to post a reel, that was beneficial.
Oh, you learn a lot about yourself there. How you hold yourself, how you carry yourself, and you get better and better and better at it. And we are, as we're talking about you climbing the corporate ladder, we're progressive beings. We want to get incrementally better at something to get some sort of positive feedback.
You want to spiral upwards, not downwards. And with the podcast platform, the difference is you have this longer period of time to ramble, to talk, and ahs, and then like, how do I stop saying that same phrase? James used to say, do you know what I mean? And that was a running theme. I think we counted up in one episode. He said it like close to 90 times over an hour episode. So things like that, you don't realise your tics and your traits.
Verbal tics, that's it. And the number of ones that I had over time that I had to listen back to and be like, need to stop that. It made me better at my day job as well, on sales calls, on presenting, and I'd had a bit of practice at that by watching my sales calls back before I started podcasting. So it was a deadly combination when I came to it. That was a tool I
used in the corporate space for coaching. It's like there was a call or a customer complaint. It's like, we don't know why they complained. We break down that journey. It's like, like if you just changed the one word you said to them, you can see how irate they got. So I had an idea in my head of what that could do. Coming into the podcast game, just excelled that. Even from if I've said something and I'm pausing in between words and I'm looking back in it, it's like I'm not cognitively as sharp as I normally am there. What's going on? It's then allowed me to zoom out. We've not been training as much. You've not been doing this. You've not been sleeping well. Like it's more than just the conversations you have. It's the other things you're doing in life.
It's great to develop self-awareness. I think it's a great tool. And like I say, I don't think everyone should start a podcast. The whole recording conversation with friends, I think, could be really, really helpful for people. But having an awareness of how you do something and then refining that art is such a rewarding process for anyone to do in whatever field it is. It could be building your body a particular way. It could be building your career a separate way. It could be building some sort of podcast.
How you speak to someone as well. So that's how, like, I know I was always better than average in the space just where I came from through living in England, speaking a little bit more properly, how you greet someone. But when you're interviewing someone that you don't know as well, like the breakdown of that skill, like it's crazy how that carries over because you've got someone sitting across you. Sometimes I'm a little bit nervous because they've got cameras in front of them that they're not used to, and how you able to calm their nerves by asking them questions and making them feel comfortable. Like, that's a pretty good skill to have, especially in my profession where I'm reliant on being a nice, likeable person to help someone with their fitness goals.
With their fitness goals. It's so cool, isn't it? And I know you had some other reflections within your episode 200 when you were thinking back about things you've learned about your life and what you've thought about.
Personally, yeah.
What stands out?
So a couple of things. The loneliness one was a hard-hitting one because as we approached the 200 episode, James had just freshly left. I was in Vegas at the time, actually. Me and Jill were on holiday, and Gavin, who rented the studio out as well, I was editing one of his videos while I was away because to go up on, I think he's released his on a Tuesday or something like this. So the Sunday I'm editing it, and he opens up the podcast and he's like, I am, this is going to be the last episode I do for a wee while. I'm not going to continue it. So I was like, So James sent me the file to edit. I was like, what do you think of this? So he had no choice to go, because one, if he texts me, when are you back? I sort of know something's not right. And if he texts me like, oh yeah, fair play. Like Gavin was very much one of the reasons we started podcasting, etc.
Got you on in the first place.
James
you had something to look at.
James kind of had to text breakup call me, like, if that makes sense. So he texts saying, look, I'll speak to you when we're back more about this, but I've really had a deep think about this. I don't think, like, not that I don't think, I definitely don't want to continue doing the podcast. Yada, yada, yada. So that happened, then I had this 9-hour flight back, and I sat and reflected a lot in that flight. I didn't watch any movies.
You raw dogged it, bro.
I raw dogged it. I had a playlist that would like download songs wise, but only downloaded 2 songs, and I just they were on repeat. And
what song? Good songs.
See that Millions song that I never, I'm talking about the wife sing. Sorry for the audience listening to that one. And Post Malone and what's the new country one that he done?
Luke Combs.
Or Morgan Wallen. Yeah, so they two
I had
songs,
some help. That is a belt.
So I had some help because I've been waiting for that song to come out. That was on, Millions was on, and it was those 2 songs in repeat, and it just became numb. And I listened to that for about 3 hours. I bought a little notebook from the airport shop, and I started writing my thoughts. I was like, right, what do I want to do? And I started writing ideas for the podcast. Is it something I want to continue with? And that gave me the initial chance to kind of reflect and look back at the previous 200 episodes. And it was like, a question I kept writing was, do I get another co-host? Do I want to do this alone? And I was like, why wouldn't I want to do it alone? And I had to confront this whole feeling of loneliness, this want to be liked by other people, have someone in your corner, have someone support you. And I was like, you know what, I've got these people in my life, but why would I not want to do something that I've got so much passion towards? I've made the PT and side of things work. Why don't I make the podcasting work? So that was the first time kind of reflecting on that. As I recorded a couple of episodes, came up to episode 200, I was thinking about loneliness, and I was like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And I've spoken about it a couple of times. Me and Gillian's been together for 13 years of our life, but in her...
Married, lived together for a long time.
Yeah, so I've always got, like, James always had the loneliness of going home and no one's there, but I would leave a job that's very sociable to go home and have someone there, and you're stuck constantly talking. So when Jill used to go on these corporate meetings or whatever, where she'd go down south for a couple of days, I'd have these periods of time where I'd have tons of clarity, and I just felt, I was like, wow, I feel recharged. And that's where I started to experience loneliness can also be a superpower. And just as it happened, episode 200 in the reflection part, Jill was in New York, so I was at home, and I was like, right, being lonely isn't a bad thing. That ain't a bad trait to have, but you also need to recognise, so I lost some, not like they died or anything, but just friendships had fallen apart. Some real close relationship I'm now distant with because I pursued this journey of business, self-development, my own thing. And a lot of that came down to also me not showing up in that friendship relationship as well. Whether that would have kept that relationship going or not, but...
We don't know, that's academic. Yeah.
But also I had to recognise that, right, loneliness, I do want to do this, I want to work hard on my business, I want to put the time and effort in, but also need to make sure that I'm communicating this to the others around me. And that was a hard hitting lesson where I was like, you know what, it's all right for it to be lonely, but don't dwell on it. Don't kind of see it as a bad thing. See it as a good thing, but then also see where there's other areas of your life where it doesn't have to be lonely. Yeah,
I think we're tribal beings still, and we want people around us. But we spoke about the benefits of the night shift. We spoke about shower thoughts. Spoke about going on a walk with the notebook and no input.
Or getting outside, getting heart rate up. Yeah, I know you've started running recently. I don't know if you've realised that as well. But when you're out running, there is an endorphin rush with it. There's a clarity that comes with, you're in your head. Whether you're listening to an audiobook or you're listening to a podcast, you get that time, that space, and that's really what I've associated that loneliness with. The other thing,
selective loneliness, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like choose your hard, isn't it? It's also like, if you're not, like, I don't know, I'm trying to put myself in a position where people are viewing loneliness as a negative thing, but
well, there's the whole, loneliness is a silent killer. It's worse than smoking 20 cigarettes a day because people don't feel connected. But when you're selectively unplugging to get time yourself and have an element of alone time, not necessarily just loneliness.
Oh yeah, there's
so important.
Yeah, so there's ups and downs of anything that we do. There's extreme ends, and it's trying to tip the scales to have them balanced. So yeah, that's one. The other one was the whole fulfillment side of things and happiness. So over the years, you mentioned earlier that I dipped my toe into the whole property investing side of things. I done that because I was PTing one-to-one personal training sessions, went on my honeymoon, lying in the sun lounger, and I was like, okay, this month's income is just dramatically dipped. I've got people finishing up. I was like, oh shit, when I go on holiday, this isn't really a business, this is just trading time for money. I was like, okay, let me look at online coaching. I had a ton of ideas what I was going to do, and was just listening to an audiobook, listening to Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and the whole property investment came up. There was always an idea to build a portfolio of Airbnbs or something like that. So I thought, right, that's what I'm going to do. So I came back and invested. I was listening to that audiobook. Richard's ad came up for the whole Jumpstart. Went to that. Dream was sold. I was like, right, okay, I'm going to do this.
Protege, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to do Protege. Went through that, and it's so weird how the signs are all there, but you don't listen to them. The end of Protege, you write a letter to yourself where you want to be in a year's time. So I hadn't started a podcast. This wasn't on the cards either. And I was like, write a letter to yourself that they send out in a year's time. And I wrote at the very top, the first thing I start writing is, start a podcast and make sure that you've been consistent uploading. That's all I wrote in that letter. And I was like, have a couple of properties under you. I wrote that as well because you're hyped up off the back of it. But at the bottom it was like, be really good at your job from a personal training point of view, and be great in your relationship. So they were the main things that I was thinking about at the time.
Proper pillars.
Yeah, like real pillars. And I'd wrote that property was one part in that. Finished Protege, went to look at a house literally the week after Protege. Me and Brian were about to do like a deal together, and Kerry this is when Kerry had messaged me, and she's like, Scott wants to sit down with you, and I got this place. And it sort of opened my eyes. I was like, fuck am I doing? Like, I've tried the whole, like, why do I want a property? A wee bit more stable income. It's like, can I not do that in the profession that I am really fucking good at, or I really fucking love? And that's where I was like, right, you can do a ton of different things, but stay in your lane. Like, get so freaking good at doing the thing that you're already doing before you start pivoting out. Because I was like, you've not even done this a year yet, and you're already thinking about these other things.
It's shiny object syndrome. Yeah. It's over there and it's distracting.
So that was the part that I was reflecting on. But also when I got this gym, when I got this place, I was like, right, got the podcast studio. Someone asked me if they could rent the space out. I said yes. Started chasing it. I was like, okay, there's a good bit of money in that. Started renting the space out. And I started thinking about all these different things you can do to bring money in, to be a wee bit, to go on a holiday, to do these things that really was kind of chasing the happiness element, but it was taking me away from coaching. So I found myself, I was doing...
When I heard you talk about this, Dale, the happiness element, I think it was chasing the pleasure.
Yeah.
Whereas I think what you're about to explain is that you wanted the fulfillment. And I think it's so good the way that you articulate the difference between the two.
Oh yeah, so I don't know if I'll do the same job at
Let's do it.
But the happiness for me was, if I kind of break that down, things that give me happiness was gaming, was maybe watching an anime show that I really enjoyed, or watching something on Netflix. And don't get me wrong, it's also spending time with my partner on that. But when I distilled and broke that down, joy and happiness are a little bit different, and I get more joy from the things that I'm fulfilled in doing. So when I'm training someone, I'm transforming someone's life, or they get their first deadlift, or they walk it through the doors of the gym that they've not been able to do for the last 10 years, being able to pick something up or pick their kids up without lower back pain that they've had for the previous 5 years. That gave me what I thought was happiness, but really was joy. That was the joy element, and that was the difference between those pleasure, those happiness that you can sort of chase, but you do it enough times, it doesn't become pleasure, it doesn't become happiness anymore. You start going, oh, I should be doing all these other things.
You hedonically adapt as well, and you know that the other thing is what gives you a deeper sense. And what we want as humans, of course, is those intrinsic pleasures, but we also want something more meaningful. And that's one of the big things for me. Like, let's do things that really feel on a deeper spiritual level, that move me towards where I want to get to and have this positive ripple effect. Yeah. That's a big thing. The big thing for the podcast for me has been the feedback and the support of the listeners and the impact it's had, and the evergreen nature of it as well, where somebody says to you, oh, I listened to episode 4 with Chris Reeve, and I know I released that in April 2020.
Yeah.
And somebody's like, when he spoke about this, that was amazing. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, that is really meaningful. That's not happiness. Happiness is maybe the Critical Drinker podcast I just released just hit a record number of plays on YouTube for its first few days, and I'm like, oh, that's really cool.
It's like that,
but it's that's surface level.
It's the whole buzzword of the delayed gratification, things like that. Like the journey is like the man will walk further than the man will walk further who enjoys the journey than the man who loves the destination. So you chase these kind of arbitrary numbers that you bring into your life, but in reality it's like, right, go to a deeper level, go under it, peel another layer back and really ask yourself, like, what do you enjoy doing? And I found when I said that to myself, I was like, it ain't about properties, it ain't about these other things that I'm trying to chase, like business wise, development wise, investment wise. It generally comes back to like, the thing I love doing is helping people. Why have I stopped doing more of the stuff that gives me that joy? And that's where I came kind of full circle with that, and only kind of recently started picking that back up over the last couple of months. I think the wake up call was James leaving as well, because I thought, okay, we'll do programs, we'll do this when it comes to fitness. Okay, he's not ready to come on board with that, so we'll just wait. And I'm like, right, okay, what do I do while we wait? Okay, I'll take this client on and we'll do these, we'll hire the studio out here, we'll do the podcasting side of things. And I was like, but I'm not coaching, I'm not doing what I love.
You had the handbrake on a little bit.
The what?
The handbrake was on a little bit.
Oh yeah, it was.
It's not a position that somebody like you wants to be in.
Keys were at the engine. I wasn't in the same car, I was in a different, I was in the
Really?
bus.
It's not like you?
Yeah. So I think, I don't know if it's the whole, I don't know, there was bits of me I felt, I don't know, getting caught up in the whole mentorship game, and it was like, okay, you should be making this a month. It's like, right, how do I make that a month? Right, okay, cut these corners, do X, Y, Z. Okay, trading time for money, how do a better time if I do this investment or whatever it is. Like there was no like actual substance of anything that I was doing that was ticking that box of, no, just be a really good fucking coach, or just be the person, or be known as the person that helps people with their health and fitness. It became the gym owner, and that's where I never wanted to be. The whole idea of having this place wasn't
being a gym owner made me a worse PT. I saw that episode, and I really resonate with that. And these things have to happen for you to then
you need to
reflect on, and then be like, okay, so moving forward, here's what I'm going to do as my keystone habits, my keystone reflections that mean that I don't end up back in that space.
Mm-hmm. And the whole gym owner one, it's crazy, because I knew like gyms have a different model to what personal trainers have. Gyms want a higher membership with sleeper members because the recurring revenue that comes in. We want the people to show up in the gym as often as possible. They sort of clash, and I found myself, I was like, right, let me just get X amount of PTs in, then the rent's covered, then I've got a wee bit more money to play with, and then I can invest that in here and there. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like, what? This is generally not moving me closer towards the goal that I want to do.
Keep the goal. And I think, speaking to you just now, when we WhatsApp, when we chat about how our podcasts are going, and when I see you posting on Instagram, I think you seem really aligned at the moment, and that's a great place to be.
Yeah, I think that's came with all those lessons, all those dwelled time on going, right, why do I not feel happy? And it's like, oh no, you're not happy. It's like you're not fulfilled. What gives you that fulfillment? What gives you that joy? Okay, being spending time with Jillian, having time away, having our little family trips to the weekend. It's like, right, what else? And it's like, oh, you like helping people. Oh, no wonder you've got less clients than you've ever had before. Does that maybe have something to do with it? And it's starting to reiterate, right, your whole idea was to make an impact in the fitness space. Are you doing that? And it's like, yeah, okay, you've ticked the box with the podcast, but also they've been half-arsed because you've had a co-host and you just sit down and you go, right, let's talk about fat loss, boom, go. Like, so they've never been, not that they were bad episodes, but they were never...
You feel you can take it to the next level, and I think having watched especially the guest stuff that you're doing just now, I think you're ramping up and up and up.
Kind of making my way through that. So they're two of the most kind of impactful lessons. Turning 30 in amongst all of that is just one of them. You kind of feel me on that one. You just go, wow, like 30 years on this earth done. Mine brought me to my mortality. I don't know if you started kind of questioning that yourself.
I still feel quite young because I look quite young, and a lot of people still like see on holiday the number of people, like a lot of the boys are 26 to, or maybe 25 to 28, and they all couldn't believe that I was the oldest out the group. But that was just, I guess I've got a boyish face, and I always
regardless
had.
Of like how you look, do you not think like when you think of being 30 when you were growing up, you thought, oh my
goodness, I thought I was old. Yeah,
like life is going to be a lot different. So for me, being aware, I think I called that pillar like being aware of my own mortality. And what I was really meaning by that was my whole 20s just went, boom, flew by.
So fast.
And the biggest lesson in all of that, which I've had to really experience, like the dream that I'm in just now, or the dream life that I wanted for myself, I genuinely am living. I'm married. I've my soulmate that I've been with for 13 years. I've got a dog. Like me, like just on the dog element, me and Jillian, when we were 15, 16, before we known each other, we always wanted like a golden retriever named Cooper. Like, so I have all these things that I dreamt of being this young
and
kid.
They're also not just materialistic things, they're like intrinsic value based things, like the career, the family, the lifestyle. It's so not just like you say, oh, I got the Audi A7, that's amazing, but it's not the really deep fulfilling stuff.
Yeah, and the places we've been to, the house that we have, the gym that I own. I'm like, because when you get your house, it's like, okay, I'm going to do up the kitchen, I'll do up the back garden, I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll do that. And you're like, wow, let's just sit and breathe in. Let's just breathe in the house. Let's enjoy the house that we're in. Same with the experiences that we have. Like Switzerland has been up there with one of the best places I've ever been on in this whole world, and be able to do that with Jillian. Like I remember sitting there and I was like, that was the first time I was like, I don't want this to end, but I don't want to think about anything else other than being present in this moment, because I found myself as we got towards the end of that holiday, it was like, oh, when we go back, I need to do this. I'm already like wishing my life away. And we all do that. We do it. Like as soon as I got this gym, I was like, I want this podcast studio, I want this, I want that. Instead of going, we're here. We are here.
By the time this comes out, I've released the episode with Oliver Burkeman. He wrote 4,000 Weeks, and he has this fight against I'll be happy when.
Yeah.
Or when this happens, I can relax. Or he's big on time management. Once I've got this out the way, I'll have loads of free time to do this. Yeah. And that's not true. It's a complete fallacy and lie we tell ourselves. Like, see if you and I are like, oh, let's get some stuff booked in for the start of September. Our calendars will be quite clear then. But guess what? It'll fill up with all the mundane stuff that we bulk out. Yeah. Exactly. But it's just at this moment in time, it's not happened yet. So he's huge on that. And I'm sure my audience will be like a bit shaken up by that at some point, because he's massive on that space. But I really think that is a trap. I'll be happy when this happens, this will happen to me. You're
genuinely wishing your life away. And we don't see, when you kind of break down, I'm like, okay, my 20s to my 30s went really quick. And it was every bit in that. It's like the promotion at work. When's the next promotion? Okay, when's that next paycheck? When's the next holiday? You're constantly like thinking of all these other things. And it's not like, for me, it was never, oh, I'll be happy when. It was just like, right, okay, that's just what's going to happen. It's like, whoa, come back. What are you doing just now? Like, and that's what I found very, like, over this year in particular. Year one was like, get the studio up and running. This second year was like, you know what, like, breathe, take your time. Everything's still going to move forward, but enjoy it while you're in it. Because I wish I could go back to that first week of being a PT again, the first couple of months. I wish I could go back to the first time I became the manager in that site in Nottingham. I was that young, fresh-faced guy. Like, just, I wish I could go on through those experiences again, but you only get to do it once. And you're all like, when you become a personal trainer, for example, you're like, can't wait to get 50 clients. But it's like, see that first client? You're just like, oh my God, somebody's trusting me with their fitness. Especially if you're in it because you love it and you want to make a true impact. Like, say, oh fuck, this is my chance. It's my chance to shine. That sort of does.
You chase that feeling again. I respect that, Dale. And like I said, I think you're in a great spot just now. I'm super excited for what's to come, and I've loved this chat, and I'm sure we're going to get lots of more podcast opportunities in the future. If people want to continue the conversation with you, where should they head towards?
So you can find me on Instagram at Coach Crossar. If you want to check out the podcast as well, that's at Bulletproof Mindset __ on Instagram. But yeah, absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Dale, thanks for coming on. Thanks for having me in the studio, and thanks to you, the listener. I'll be back to speak to you all again very, very soon.